Beneath the thunderous clash of swords and the roar of kingdoms at war lies a silent struggle, one fought not with blades, but with ink and broken promises. Discover how a fragile parchment, written in shadows, reshaped the fate of medieval power forever. The dawn light spills pale and muted through narrow slits carved deep into the cold stone walls, scattering dust motes like forgotten souls adrift in still air. A shroud of silence blankets the ancient chamber, broken only by the faint rustle of brittle parchment and the whisper of a lone quill scratching against worn oak. The heavy table beneath this quiet tumult bears the scars of centuries-deep gouges, faded stains, and the weight of countless hands, some trembling with hope, others clenched tight in defiance. Here, in this fortress, sealed from the world by walls, soaked in smoke and sweat, noble voices meet in whispered debate, wrestling with the raw edges of fate and freedom. The air is thick with the scent of burning tallow and cold stone, a sharp contrast to the soft breath of the scribe who leans close to the fragile parchment. His fingers tremble beneath the weight of history, tracing the delicate lines of a document that holds more than ink or words. It is a fragile thread spun between kings and barons, a tether that might bind power to law or shatter beneath the strain of ambition. Outside, the distant clang of a smith hammering iron echoes like a harsh reminder. Power is forged and broken, not only by sword, but by silent agreements sealed in shadowed halls. Each scratch of the quill seems to echo beyond the chamber, reverberating through corridors where the echoes of broken oaths haunt stone and timber alike. The parchment, yellowed and fragile, carries the burden of thousands of tapestry, woven from the promises made and shattered by those who dared to dream of justice, and those who sought only to preserve their own dominion. The seals pressed into the wax-bare, silent witness, their impressions, a map of loyalties traded like precious coins, of bargains whispered behind veils and closed doors. It is here that the invisible wars rage, fought not with bloodied blades, but with words sharpened by deceit and desperation. Within these vaulted ceilings, the document's power lingers not in the carefully chosen phrases, but in the spaces between, the men the promises kept and those broken in silence. It is a battleground where the soul of a kingdom is contested, where justice hangs by a thread as delicate as the parchment itself. Shadows dance upon the walls, flickering with the pulse of candlelight, casting doubt and hope in equal measure. The scribe's breath fogs the air, a ghostly veil that mingles with the smoke curling from a dying flame, fragile yet stubborn against the encroaching dark dot in this room. The fate of many is distilled into ink and wax a precarious balance, where every word could tip the scales toward tyranny or freedom. The nobles who gathered here have etched their wills into this fragile accord, their voices heavy with the weight of lives both crushed and spared. Outside these walls, peasants toil. Under harsh skies, their suffering unseen but felt in every clause and covenant. The document is a silent guardian of hope, a beacon flickering through the fog of power, betrayal, and survival. Yet beneath the solemnity lies the unyielding truth. Law, like all fragile things, is subject to the cruelty of men. The parchment will bear witness to broken promises, to alliances forged and dissolved in whispered conspiracies. It is a testament to a struggle waged not with swords, but with silence, a war of trust and treachery beneath the surface of grand halls and courtly gestures as the candle guttered low. The chamber seemed to hold its breath, suspended between past and future, between despair and resolve. The scribe's hand hesitated over the final stroke, a silent prayer woven into the movement, a hope that this fragile thread might yet bind kings and subjects alike in a new covenant of justice. The document, fragile and worn, remained a monument to the fragile dance of power, delicate as frost on stone, yet fierce as the will to survive. Beyond the chamber's cold walls, the fortress watched through the dawn's muted light, steadfast and unyielding. It stood as both prison and sanctuary, a witness to the slow, silent battles that shaped kingdoms in the shadows. The fragile thread of law had been spun, but its strength was yet to be tested against the ruthless tides of ambition and betrayal. The air held a fragile stillness, a breath poised on the edge of change. The promise etched in ink and seal was not an end, but the beginning of a long, arduous journey, a journey where loyalty could fracture like brittle parchment, and justice would forever walk the line between shadow and light in the quiet dawn. The fortress seemed to murmur a warning. Power was never given, only taken on. The true war was just beginning. The heavy timber door groans against the cold wind, sealing a chamber thick with smoke and unspoken tension. Inside, noble figures, wrapped in threadbare velvet and battered iron, tread cautiously, their movements measured beneath vaulted ceilings, heavy with the scent of beeswax and damp leather. The flicker of torches casts trembling shadows that stretch like restless ghosts across faces marked by worry, their eyes burning with the weight of stolen futures and fragile peace. The room is a crucible where silence speaks louder than words. Every glance a gamble, every folded hand a step deeper into a shadowed game of power, far removed from the clamor of open battlefields. Outside, brittle leaves crunch beneath the hurried steps of messengers, carrying rumors sharp as daggers, their whispers swallowed by cold stone corridors, lined with ancient tapestries bearing the scars of forgotten wars. The echoes of those battles still haunt the threads, faded banners telling stories of blood spilled and kingdoms broken. Yet here, in this dimly lit chamber, the weapons are silence and ink, and the battlefield is woven from the fragile threads of trust and treachery. At the center lies the Magna Carta, humble in its ragged edges and faded ink, yet alive with a breath that stirs beneath the weight of history. Parchment, more than mere paper, binds tyrants and rebels alike in a silent contract born of blood, fear, and desperate hope. It is the fragile heart of a truce, forged not in victory but in concession, a precarious promise that law might one day tame the ruthless hand of power. The chamber vibrates with the quiet hum of loyalty, tested and trust betrayed, the air thick with the scent of smoldering hearths that seem to guard the secrets spoken here. Beyond the walls, the distant tolling of a bell marks time's relentless passage, a solemn reminder that this fragile peace may only be the calm before the coming storm. The nobles gathered here carry the weight of countless lives and futures. In their weary shoulders, their faces etched with shadows of doubt and determination. Each seal pressed upon the parchment is a symbol of hope and defiance, a silent rebellion against a world ruled by unchecked might. Yet, beneath the surface, suspicion festers like a slow poison, threatening to unravel the delicate weave of promises. The Magna Carta does not shout its power. It breathes quietly, waiting, enduring a beacon, flickering in the encroaching darkness. As the candle flames dance, casting wavering light upon the fragile words, the room seems suspended between despair and possibility. The silent covenant speaks of more than rights or privileges. It carries the weight of exile and sacrifice, of voices silenced and struggles unseen. The parchment becomes a mirror, reflecting the fractured souls of those who dared to dream of justice in a world ruled by fear. Outside, the clatter of armor fades. The footsteps of the relentless march of history growing faint but never gone, reminding all that the war for power is eternal and often fought in shadows. In this chamber, the Magna Carta lives as both promise and warning, a testament to the fragile dance between law and might. The nobles know well that paper cannot shield against betrayal, nor ink stop the ambitions that simmer beneath polished steel. Yet they cling to this fragile thread, a hope woven from the blood and sweat of those who came before, hope that one day justice might rise from the ashes of tyranny. As the night deepens, the flickering torches bow low, shadows curling round. The worn faces like mourning veils. The chamber breathes with the weight of all that has been lost and all that remains to be won. The Magna Carta rests silent but alive, a beacon in the gathering dusk, waiting for the dawn that will carry its promise beyond these walls and into the hearts of those still caught in the endless struggle for freedom and power. And so the fragile covenant holds a whispered rebellion in the quiet, a breath against the storm. Beyond these stone walls, the world turns, kingdoms rise and fall. But here, in this sacred space, the true battle is written in ink and silence, a war waged with shadows and hope. The night holds its secrets close, but with the first light, the story will continue, unfolding beyond the silent covenant, where the fate of kingdoms will be shaped in the hearts of those who dare to dream. A cold wind howls through the castle battlements, its bitter breath carrying the acrid scent of burning peat and the distant, weary cries of sentinels who stand watch over a land torn by ambition and betrayal. Rain slicks the ancient stones, turning the ramparts into a glistening mirror for the gathering dusk. The castle, a fortress carved from granite and grief, holds its breath beneath storm-dark skies, its walls bearing silent witness to the fractured world beyond the world, where power is seized not only by sword but by whispers and fragile promises. Inside a dim chamber, a council assembles, faces gaunt and weathered, carved deep with lines, forged in hardship and the crushing weight of command. The flicker of a single candle dances across the rough-hewn table where the Magna Carta lies, unassuming yet fierce, resting beneath a cold, iron ring-an emblem of chains yet unbroken, promises waiting to be fulfilled. The trembling flame casts painterly shadows, tracing the faded script that speaks not only of rights and laws, but of a history etched in silence, sealed with desperation and fear. Fingers worn from toil and war glide reverently over the fragile parchment, recalling the long shadows of oaths made in shadowed halls, where loyalty is as volatile as the flickering light. Beyond these stone walls, the world waits in anxious Hush, peasants, shiver beneath threadbare cloaks, their breaths visible in the chill air. Knights tighten straps of worn leather and steel, their eyes hardened by the certainty of bloodshed to come. The weight of unspoken pacts settles like frost over fields and forests alike, a quiet pressure that binds all lives in this realm of uncertainty. This document, this slender thread of parchment, wields a power unseen or shield, and a sword entwined, threading through the tapestry of rulership and rebellion. It embodies a fragile hope that even kings, ensnared by ambition's grip, might one day bow to the law's quiet command. In this chamber where shadows meet stone, the Magna Carta endures not merely as ink on vellum, but as a living covenant between rulers and the ruled, a silent battle waged in corridors of power, where justice and loyalty dance a delicate, dangerous waltz. Its words echo faintly in the hearts of those who remember the sacrifices behind each clause, the betrayals whispered behind closed doors, the blood spilled in secret wars. Each mark, each faded letter carries the weight of lives shattered and hopes kindled, an invisible chain binding the fate of kingdoms yet unborn. Outside, the cold wind sweeps again, carrying with it the restless sigh of the land itself. The sentinels on the ramparts exchange wary glances, knowing the fragile peace held within these walls may shatter with the coming dawn. The candle's flame flickers low, shadows stretching long like the uncertain future that lies beyond the stone. The council remains silent, the heavy iron ring a reminder of bonds forged in fire and fear, unbroken but ever tested by the tides of history. This chapter in the story of power is not told in the clash of swords or the roar of battle cries, but in the quiet spaces between, where loyalty is pledged in hushed tones, and justice is a fragile flame that must be guarded against the encroaching dark. The Magna Carta lives as a testament to these unseen wars, a beacon flickering in the gloom, holding fast to the hope that law may one day stand stronger than tyranny. As the night deepens, the council disperses into the cold stone corridors, leaving behind the silent covenant that binds them all. Outside, the land holds its breath, caught between the looming storm of war and the fragile dawn of a new order. The candle's last glow fades into shadow, but the promise sealed in ink endures, waiting, watching, a quiet force shaping the destinies of kings and commoners alike. With each passing moment, the world tilts ever closer to change. The invisible battles beneath these walls, weaving their silent influence into the fabric of history. And as the first light breaks over the horizon, the story continues, carried forward by those who dare to dream of justice in a world still ruled by the fragile dance of power and survival. The low toll of a distant bell fractures the heavy silence of a frost-bitten morning, its mournful clang threading through the cold stone arches of an ancient chapel. Outside, the world lies veiled in mist, but within these hallowed walls, the air is thick with the scent of burning tallow, mingling with the sharp chill of breath exhaled in prayer and quiet desperation. Shadows pool beneath the vaulted ceiling as a lone monk kneels upon the cold flagstones, his frame bent with the weight of years spent bearing witness to a kingdom held hostage by cruelty and chance. His hands, rough and calloused from years of labor and devotion, clasp a fragile manuscript, close-worn edges curling like the fragile hopes pressed between its pages. The Magna Carta, a slender thread woven through a tapestry of fear and rebellion, rests beneath the wavering candlelight, its faded script a testament to promises made and shattered in the dark. The silence in the chapel is not empty but full heavy, with unspoken truths and prayers whispered like fragile wings beating against a storm. The monks' eyes, pools of solemn reflection, mirror the flickering flames as they dance across ancient stone and weathered wood, casting long shadows that stretch like the centuries themselves. Here, faith and law converge in uneasy union, the manuscript's words echoing like distant thunder beneath the solemn arches. Each carefully inked letter carries the ghosts of broken alliances and secret pacts, forged far from the clang of swords and the roar of battle. It is a covenant not of bloodshed, but of ink and faith, fragile as the flame that burns low beside him, outside. The frost laces the fields and creeps along the thatched roofs of distant villages, where peasants huddle beneath threadbare cloaks, their breath misting in the chill dawn. Their lives are the unseen battlegrounds, where the silent power of this document might one day reach a power born not of violence, but of the idea that even kings are bound by the law they once wielded without question. Yet, in this cold chapel, beneath the watchful gaze of stone saints, that power is a burden heavy with uncertainty. The monk's breath rises in soft clouds, mingling with the curling smoke of incense and the faint rustle of parchment, as he contemplates the impossible task of justice in a world where loyalty is a blade sharpened by fear and survival. The Magna Carta, fragile and faded, becomes more than a document. It is a sanctuary of hope and despair, a beacon in the gathering dusk of tyranny. It holds the weight of countless lives caught in the merciless tides of power and rebellion. A fragile promise carved into history by those brave enough to imagine a kingdom ruled not by the whim of one, but by the quiet dignity of law. The chapel's cold stone seems to breathe with the tension of that promise. The flickering candle flame, a fragile defiance against the darkness beyond, as dawn creeps slow and uncertain over the horizon. Light filters through stained glass, scattering shards of color across cold floor and weathered walls, an ephemeral reminder that even in the harshest times, beauty and hope persist in fragile fragments. The monk rises, the manuscript held close like a sacred relic, stepping out from the shadows into the awakening world. Outside, the first rays of sun catch the glint of distant armor, the rustle of movement signaling the stirrings of a kingdom, still caught in the endless dance between power and submission, between law and chaos. The bell tolls once more, a solemn echo carrying over frozen fields and through the silent chapel, marking time not just in hours, but in the unfolding story of a fragile peace. The monk's footsteps fade into the quiet, leaving behind the sanctuary of silence where faith and justice are held in delicate balance, waiting for the world beyond to catch up to the fragile hope inscribed in faded ink. The struggle continues, silent and unseen, beneath the gaze of stone saints and the watchful eyes of history. And as the light grows stronger, the question lingers like a breath held in the cold morning air. Can law truly bind the hand that wields power, or is it forever destined to be a fragile covenant in the shadow of ambition? The story moves forward, carried on the wings of that fragile hope, into the unknown chapters yet to be written. Thunder growls, low and distant, a slow drum echoing across the rolling hills. As rain lashes down upon moss-covered roofs and weary thatch, cloaking a village bowed beneath darkening skies. The air is heavy with the primal sense of wet earth, peat smoke and cold stone, a mingling of life and decay that breathes through narrow lanes, slick with mud. Within the fragile warmth of a humble hearth, a mother cradles her child wrapped tight in threadbare cloth, and a quiet dread that refuses to be named. Outside, shadows move like ghosts' figures, cloaked in rough wool, threading through the mist with silent purpose, their faces carved by hardship, their steps measured by the slow rhythm of survival. They are bound not only by blood and soil, but by unseen decrees penned far away in cold castle chambers, words inked on parchment like the Magna Carta, fragile promises that ripple beneath the surface of their everyday lives. In this damp village, where hope flickers like the trembling candlelight against darkened walls, the Magna Carta's reach is subtle yet unyielding. It is a thread woven between stone battlements and thatched huts, a whispered covenant binding lord and serf, noble and peasant, in a delicate dance of power and obligation. The mother's weary gaze lingers on a worn wooden cross hanging by the doorframe, its rough-hewn surface, a silent testament to faith hardened by suffering and endurance tested by relentless hardship. Around her, the village exhales a prayer as soft as the candle's flame, a breath held between despair and stubborn hope, while far above, torches flicker on castle walls, silent sentinels, guarding promises made and broken, contracts signed in shadow and ink. This is the unseen power of the Magna Carta, not in the clash of swords or the roar of siege engines, but in the quiet resilience of those who dwell in its shadow. It is the law's invisible weight carried on bent backs and calloused hands, the hope that even the most distant edicts might one day protect those who toil unseen beneath heavy crowns. The document's words ripple through the soil, touching fields plowed by tired hands and stirring the embers of distant fires where stories are told in whispers. In these muddy lanes and low-ceilinged cottages, survival is shaped by a fragile trust, by the fragile promise that law might one day temper cruelty, that justice could reach beyond cold halls and iron gates. Outside, the rain patters softly on leaves and stones, the village settling into the embrace of night. The mother rocks her child gently, humming a lullaby learned from her own mother's lips, an ancient melody that carries through generations like a fragile lifeline, her eyes close against the weight of 1,000 fears. Yet within that small room, beneath the flickering candlelight, there is a quiet defiance, a refusal to surrender to the darkness. The law, distant yet present, breathes quietly here, a guardian not of glory, but of the fragile thread that binds kingdom to commoner, promise to practice, hope to endurance. As the night deepens, a faint glow flickers from the distant castle torches, carried by figures who shape the fate of worlds unseen by those who sleep beneath humble roofs. The Magna Carta lingers between these realms, a silent witness to the struggles that define the age, the delicate balance of power and survival, of loyalty and betrayal, of law as shield and sword. The village exhales once more. The storm outside, a soft murmur against the walls. carrying the unspoken question that haunts every heart beneath this fragile peace. Can the law truly protect those it was written to serve? Or will it remain a fragile promise forever out of reach? In the stillness of that rain-soaked night, beneath the watchful stars and the distant castle's shadow, the story of kingdoms and commoners weaves onward, carried on the breath of those who endure, who hope, who live beneath the quiet power of a fragile parchment and the ancient promise it holds. A sudden scream splits the night like a jagged blade, swallowed quickly by the thick fog that clings to the rain-slicked cobblestones. Beneath a sky swollen with gathering storm clouds, a lone figure cloaked in shadow moves with deliberate steps, the heavy weight of a sealed parchment pressed tightly against his side. Each footfall echoes softly beneath ancient stone arches, mingling with the distant clang of hammers hammering iron bonza. Stark reminder that power is forged as much by chains as by words. The air is thick with the scent of damp stone and smoldering peat fires, a cold breath rising from the earth itself, wrapping the city in a cloak of silence and secrets. This messenger carries more than paper. He bears the fragile pulse of the Magna Carta, a document whose faded ink holds the power to shift the fate of kingdoms and unravel the loyalties of men who live by the sharp edge of trust and betrayal. His breath rises in ghostly clouds, swirling like the mist that curls through narrow alleyways where shadows gather and unseen eyes watch with suspicion and hunger. The city seems to hold its breath, wrapped in muted tones and painterly darkness, as if the very stones themselves wait for what will come. The parchment's power does not lie in the words visible to all, but in the quiet wars waged beneath velvet, cloaks, whispered counsels, and midnight oaths that bind and betray in equal measure. It is a covenant written in silence and blood, a fragile thread stretching across the fractured realm, seeking to hold together a world torn by ambition, fear, and desperate hope. The messenger's cloak is soaked by the relentless rain, each drop a cold reminder of the risks he carries. Every shadow may hide a blade, every silence may mask a treacherous word. Yet, driven by a duty heavier than the storm, he presses forward through winding lanes where the flicker of torchlight glints on wet cobblestones, where faces emerge briefly from the darkness, eyes filled with hunger, suspicion, or weary resignation. The parchment's journey mirrors that of the kingdom itself, fraught, uncertain, burdened by the past, and poised on the cusp of change. As he crosses the threshold of a great hall, the warmth of a smoldering hearth fights back the chill, casting long, wavering shadows on tapestries worn by time and conflict. Around the table, figures clad in threadbare velvet and battered mail await intense silence, their faces etched with lines of hardship, their eyes burning with the flickering light of hope and dread. The Magna Carta, once distant and abstract, now lies tangible between them ragged edges and faded script, a stark reminder of promises made in desperation and fear. It is here, in these vaulted chambers, that the document's true struggle will unfold, not in open battle, but in whispered counsel and fragile alliances, where the fate of kingdoms hangs on a whisper, a nod, a trembling hand. The room is thick with the scent of beeswax and damp leather, the flicker of candle flames casting dancing shadows that seem to breathe with the pulse of unseen forces. Trust is scarce, and betrayal is a shadow that lurks behind every measured word. Yet within this fragile tension, the Magna Carta is symbol not of conquest, but of a dangerous hope that even kings might one day bow to the quiet command of law. It is a slender thread holding together a world where loyalty is currency, where justice is a blade sharpened in darkness, and where survival depends on the balance of silence and speech. Outside, the storm rages on, the relentless rain, a symphony of nature's fury against stone walls and iron gates. The city breathes beneath this tempest, unaware of the fragile pact sealed within its heart, where ink and parchment hold more power than swords and shields. The messenger's footsteps fade into the night, swallowed by the rain and shadow. Yet, the journey he has begun is only the first step in a battle waged far from open fields, one fought in the quiet corridors of power, in the folding of hands and the bending of knees. As the candlelight flickers and the storm's fury softens to a mournful whisper, a single question lingers in the cold air. Can the fragile law inscribed on a piece of parchment withstand the weight of ambition and betrayal, or will it crumble beneath the relentless tide of power? The answer lies hidden, waiting in the silent spaces between loyalty and defiance, between the shadowed halls of castles and the restless streets below. And so, beneath the cloak of night, the story moves on with a journey of whispered promises, broken oaths, and the fragile hope that law might one day tame the ruthless hands that grasp at kingdoms. The Magna Carta's true power is not written in the bold clash of battle, but in the silent endurance of those who carry its burden through storms seen and unseen, binding past to future, king to commoner, and law to life itself. The first fragile light of dawn creeps slowly through narrow slits carved into cold stone walls, painting pale bands across a chamber steeped in shadow and memory. Here, worn hands tremble as they unfold the Magna Carta, its ragged edges fragile as ancient bones, its ink faded, yet still heavy with the weight of centuries. This parchment, delicate as a whispered prayer, carries the burden of hope and betrayal, alike an artifact forged in the crucible of ambition and desperation. The air is thick with the mingled scents of beeswax and aged parchment, a quiet perfume that clings to the silence like the ghost of forgotten oaths. Beyond the chamber's walls, the muted murmur of a court gathering drifts faintly on the cold morning air. Voices rise and fall, threaded with the tension of men caught in a turbulent dance between rebellion and obedience, fear and steadfast resolve. The stone corridors echo with footsteps that carry the restless weight of a kingdom at the edge of change. Within this fragile moment, power does not wield its might with sword or spear, but with ink, fragile, volatile, and quietly transformative. The Magna Carta rests like a silent sentinel, bearing witness to the fragile equilibrium of a realm torn by ambition, loyalty, and strife. Within the chamber, shadows cling stubbornly to every corner, holding the secrets of those who lived and died under the fragile protection of promises inked but not always kept. This document, ancient and unassuming, marks the moment history balances precariously between old tyranny and the faint dawn of justice. The fragile parchment pulses not with the roar of armies, but with the quiet turning of pages, the subtle shifts of power wrought in whispered negotiations and secret glances. Here, law becomes more than words. it becomes a weapon, a shield, and the slender thread by which the soul of a kingdom might be saved or shattered. Outside, the world remains restless. The cold morning air carries the scent of frost on fields. Still waiting for spring, the faint clatter of armor, preparing for unseen conflicts, and the distant cries of those who live beneath the shadows of castle walls. Each voice in that court, each folded hand and guarded glance, holds a silent prayer that the fragile hope sewn into this document might endure, that even kings, whose power once seemed absolute, might one day bow to the quiet, unyielding rule of law. As light strengthens and shadows recede, the Magna Carta's legacy begins to unfurl not through battle cries or the clash of steel, but through patience, persistence, and the slow, steady reshaping of a fractured realm. The parchment holds a mirror to the human spirit's capacity for both cruelty and justice, for betrayal and loyalty, for silence and for the courage to speak. It is a beacon in a dark world, fragile yet enduring, reminding all who touch it that the struggle for balance between power and justice is never won at a single moment, but lives on in every breath, every choice, every step forward. And so, as dawn breaks fully over castle and countryside alike, the story presses unwoven through the lives of those who carry the Magna Carta's fragile promise in their hearts. The quiet turning of its pages signals not an end, but the beginning of a journey, one where law seeks to tame the wild hunger of ambition, and where the true battle for the soul of a kingdom will be fought not with swords, but with the enduring power of hope and justice. The fragile parchment rests once more beneath the trembling light, a silent witness to a kingdom poised on the edge of transformation, a realm forever changed by the whispered power of law.